In this video, I'll show how I use Stable Projectorz and Stable Diffusion to create design iterations on top of a 3D model using texture projection and AI image generation. This can be done with AI-generated geometry using text-to-3D tools like Genie by LumaAI, or image-to-3D tools like TripoAI, or on any traditional 3D model. One benefit of using this method is viewing your design on a 3D form and understanding how the design works over geometry and in a 3D space. Another is creating textures for 3D assets that might not need a lot of geometry detail, but can be used as props or previs assets in your pipeline. Right now, this method is still kind of a work in progress or a proof of concept, as the software used are still in development, but they can show great promise in being a strong addition to any design workflow, whether it's cars, concept design, product design, or game design. The idea focuses on combining various AI tools to assist in your design process. This may not be for everyone, but this is one way I use AI to inspire and help create concepts I may not have thought of otherwise. The first thing we'll need is a 3D model. There are many ways to create a 3D model, but I'm going to show you some AI-driven tools that will get you to a good starting point really quickly. The first tool is a text-to-3D application called Genie by LumaAI. I'll leave a link in the description. We can use the generated models from this directly in Stable Projectorz, so if you don't have a 3D model handy, this is a good way to start out. So first we'll come over to the Imagine tab. I've already got this prompt preloaded here, a low and wide concept design hatchback from the year 2050 with hard edges, Aston Martin, Honda, Porsche. And then we'll just hit create. Now this generation will probably take 30 to 40 seconds, so I'll just skip ahead real quick. You'll see a screen that looks like this once the generations are complete. And when you click on them, it will go directly to the model. As you can see, this generated a really rough volume with some graphic details, wheels, maybe a tail light, rear diffuser, front diffuser, etc. It's really up to you to kind of pick and choose which one you want. You can also come down to the right here where it says variations. Once you find something you like, you can hit variation and it will run one more time and create some new models based off of that previous one. As you can see, it's created 4 variations. When you click on them again, you'll see that they look similar to the previous model, but maybe slightly different graphics or taillights. So again, it's up to you to choose which model you want. You can close out of this, and then once you come up to your creations tab on the right there, you'll see all your generations here. I've already obviously made a few already. So looking through some of these models, I think I'm going to choose this one here. It's got some nice graphic elements or something interesting going on with the front end and on the side here. So I think this one will work really nicely for our texture upscaling and future uses. There is also a use case here where you can up-res the texture and details within Genie. So I'm going to click that now. And then once that's done, it should only take a couple minutes. Once that's done, I'll show you what the difference is between the first initial generation and the high-res. So you can see here that the high-res generation is on the left and the original generation is on the right. This took, I'd say, 6 minutes to generate, and you can see that it starts to add more detail around the wheels. It takes more of the prompt into consideration when creating some of the graphic details. Maybe this is an Aston Martin logo or something like that. Even around the rear, you can see it started to add taillights and diffuser detail. So this generation actually turned out pretty good. Sometimes this noise, I've noticed, will cause an issue when running it through image to image, but I think I'm going to give this a try. So we'll use this model in the next step in Stable Projectorz. So the next thing I'll do is come down to retopologize. I'll keep it on low and I will export an FBX model. Some things to note: Stable Projectorz right now at the moment only supports Y-up coordinate space, and I know from experience that this will export as a Y-up coordinate space, so we can use it directly in Stable Projectorz without having to reorient it. The retopology will also create a quad-based mesh over the top of this and bake out the texture to that. It'll be a normal map, diffuse, metal, and a couple others. I'll show you those before we get into it. So I will hit download, and this will run through its cleanup process and then ask to download, and we'll save it where we can access it. So the next way to create a 3D model is by using image to 3D. I had made a video about doing this a little while ago, but it was kind of a half-baked way to do it, and it just kind of extruded the image. This tool here, it's called TripoAI. I'll leave the link in the description. This does actually take a 2D image and make a 3D model from it. This also has a text to 3D functionality, but I think the image to 3D is its strongest asset. So I have this image here. This was actually generated using Stable Diffusion. So this was an AI generated image. So I just cropped out the background and am going to import this transparent PNG. So all you'll have to do is drag it into here, enter your prompt here. What you'll do is do image and go find the image and then hit create. I've already done this, so I'll just go find the model. I'm out of credits, unfortunately, at this time. There is a 600 credits free a month, and then there are paid tiers, so you can go through the pricing and the product information on their website. So the initial generation will look something like this. It's a little bit muddy. You can see kind of where it's applying textures from different views, but it did a pretty good job capturing the volume and some of the details. And then I'll come down, and I don't have the credits now, but I hit refined. So I'll just come over here and hit view refined. And the refine takes about 10 minutes. The initial generation was really quickly, maybe 30 to 40 seconds. It was really quick. And then this is the refined model. You can see it got rid of some of the marks and areas, but it did create a very good detailed model and kind of gave an alternate side on the opposite side of the vehicle here. So this is the model using image to 3D, and we can use this as well in Stable Projectorz to create new textures. And here is a side-by-side of the original image and the 3D model that it generated. You can see it kind of changed the wheels a bit, and some things are a little skewed, but I think it's pretty good. It's going to be very usable for our needs. So just like we did with Genie, we'll come over and hit retopologize. And again, I'll do low, and then I'll change this to an FBX format. This will also cost some credits, so depending on the generations and the exports you need, you will use your credits for this. And then I'll just hit download, and again, save it somewhere that I can access it. So now that we've got a 3D model created, we're going to jump into Stable Projectorz here. When you first open the software, it will open a command line that looks something like this, as well as a web address for the Stable Diffusion installation. This will be running in the background, so you want to make sure that you keep this open and don't close this. You can keep it minimized and off to the side. There's a lot more information regarding the Stable Diffusion running in the background that you can find on the Stable Projectorz website or through their YouTube channel. But this is the interface here. It opens with this default door gateway, and we'll be replacing this with our own geometry. But the main benefit of Stable Projectorz is that it preserves original UVs from your model, so you will need to have a UV mapped 3D model, which we've generated using Genie and TripoAI. The main purpose of Stable Projectorz is to texture an entire object at once using a multi-view projection. It's great for visual consistency and design iteration. You're also able to adjust the blending by painting and brushing directly on the 3D model, so I'll get into that in more detail. I'll also be leaving a link to the Stable Projectorz website and YouTube channel. You can also come down to the bottom right here and hit the question mark, and this will give you some shortcut keys and more info about how to use some of the tools in the software. I highly suggest checking out their website and the Discord. There's a lot of great information there from other users. If there's something I miss or don't cover in this video, I'm sure you can find the information there as well. So the first thing we'll want to do is replace the 3D model that's in here with the one we created in Genie, or if you have your own 3D model, you can import that as well. So I'll come over here on the left where it says 3D object, and I'll just hit load model and go find the model that we created, and I believe that was Aston. I'll click that and hit OK. And you can see it brings in with a wireframe view and a black shaded mesh. That's not showing any of the texture, so we'll want to add that as well. But you can turn on the depth, and this depth map is actually what will be used partially in the actual generation of images. So that's just these settings up here. I'll leave the wireframe off, and then I'll come over to Art and hit Custom Texture, and then I will go find the UV map texture, the diffuse texture. I believe that's this one here. Yep. Hit open, and you can see it applies the texture to the model. As long as it has the UV map, it should map correctly. So that's how you get the 3D model in here. And the next steps, I'll go over the prompting, loading different models, and some of the settings I use to generate new textures for this. So the next thing I'm going to discuss are the diffusion models that Stable Diffusion uses to actually generate the imagery. Right now I'm using Stable Diffusion XL models. This one is Protovision XL. By default, Stable Projectorz uses this Arthemy Comics. It is, I believe it's a 1.5, Stable Diffusion 1.5 version model. And you can see there's a couple other ones here that I have installed. There's a good tutorial on their YouTube channel on how to download models and add different models. You can also run, if you already have Stable Diffusion installed, you can use your local installation, so you're not adding another install of Stable Diffusion and duplicating models across your hard drive if you're worried about space and stuff like that. So definitely check out their website for more information around these. But this is the one I'll be using. You also want to double check that your control nets, this depth model, is also XL. So I have downloaded this Diffusers XL depth full. This is from Hugging Face's website. Again, Stable Projectorz YouTube goes in depth on how to add these here. You just want to make sure that they both match, that they're both XL models, or you'll run into some generation issues. The next thing we'll want to do is set up our workspace here, or the cameras, the layout that we want the model to be set up on, and the different angles we want textures projected from. So if you come into your 3D space, hit Alt left mouse button, you'll be able to rotate it around. If you hold down Control, it will snap to different views, and if you come over here to camera and you hover, you'll have your focal length here, which I will slide all the way to the left. This is more of a orthographic projection, which will be good for this side view. And then I'll just drag this down here and kind of fill the space. Then I'll take the slider and drag it up to two cameras. That is actually a little bug. It moves that first one, so we'll just have to reposition that. There we go. Now we've got our second one. I think I'm going to do kind of like a front 3/4 view for this one. Maybe a little tip up here like that. And we'll zoom in, and then I'm going to come up and do a third camera, which I will do from the rear end. Maybe a rear 3/4 as well. A little tip up on it. Then we want to kind of zoom as much as we can to fill the space. This setting over here where it's width and height, we're going to drag those over to, we'll do 2K, 2048 by 2048. That will be the texture resolution of the generation for the projection. So we want that as high as you can. Depending on the hardware of your computer, you might have to do lower. I've got a 4090, so I'm pretty sure it'll generate no problem. So once we have our views set up there, we'll come over to background art. What this is going to do is turn on a setting for essentially image to image. So we'll come over and hit custom background. Then I have a gray background I'm going to use for this. So I'll go find that. So I just have this gray background. We'll hit open. You can see it adds it in the background there. And then if you scroll down here, what it did is opens this Inpainting panel. So we'll come in here and change some of these settings. I'm going to drag the denoiser down to about 0.7, somewhere around there. This is the strength of how much the image is going to change. And then we're going to mask content. We're going to change that to original. And then I'm going to uncheck ignore depth, because I want it to use the depth from these images, just so it'll understand the form a little bit better. So that's that. We can leave these settings alone down here. And then I'm going to come back up and just verify these settings here before I get into the prompt. I'll just do a batch size of, you can set this to however many generations you want. I'll just do 2 for this. Obviously, it'll be up to you to decide how many you want to generate. The CFG scale is essentially the creative scale. You know, how much creativity from the prompt it'll use in the generation. I'll leave it at 7 for now. You can always change it. And some of these settings you'll slide back and forth. Maybe this. So the sampling steps is essentially the quality. The higher that number, the better quality the image will be, but also the longer it will take to generate that image. So I think I'll just leave it at like 25. That should be pretty good. Seed, we'll leave it -1. That will be a random seed per image generation. So I think all those settings look good for now. And now we'll put our prompt in. Up at the top you have your positive prompt and your negative prompt. So this is essentially where you tell Stable Diffusion what you want it to create, and using any words that you want to describe the object. And same with the negative prompt. And these are things you don't want it to do. So this follows the same guidelines as automatic WebUI. So if you know any of the weighting and any of the special characters and stuff, you can put those in here and it'll utilize them the same way it would using the traditional WebUI. I keep my prompts pretty simple. This is essentially what I use for a lot of mine. So you can make them as complex or as simple as you want. The output will depend basically on that input. So once I have that all set, I think I'm just going to double check all my settings here. Yeah, I lowered that to 20, and actually I changed the denoising up to 0.8. That is going to change it quite a bit more, just because I want it to be blue instead of maybe white or silver. It might pick up on this. So from here we'll just hit generate art and let it do its thing. So depending on the hardware you have, this will take a few minutes or a few seconds. Now that that's done, you can see we've got our 2 generations here. You can click on them to flip between the 2 different variations. I think I'm going to choose this top one. Again, if you change the batch size output to a higher number, you'll have more generations. But for this example, I just did the 2, and I think I'll tune up this one, maybe this one. I like this one. It's got a little headlight graphic, and yeah, this should be pretty good. So we'll stick to this one for now. And I'll go through some of the blending tools and how to adjust the brushes and blend the 3 different projections together here. So when I'm blending, I like to work from a single viewpoint. So you'll notice here you've got, when you hover over the models, you've got 3, 2, 1. Those are the corresponding cameras that we had set up here. And to switch between the brush mode, you can either click this button here, or just hover over 1, 2, or 3, and that will be the starting camera that you'll work from. I usually just work from a single one, and then I'll turn back down the field of view. This just gives me a better view of the model, I think, without the flatness of the perspective. So what we'll do here is go over the brushes. So up the top here you have your slider for the brush size. You can also hold down Shift and right mouse button. This tends to be the easiest way to do it, and this will change the size of the brush. You also have the hardness of the brush. You can hit Control 1, 2, or 3, or H to just cycle through them. I usually leave it on the softest one, which would be Control 1. And you can see as I hover over the model, it's showing me what's projected from camera 2. If I hit F1, it will show me what's projected from camera 1. So that is going to be the side view. And as I come around to the front, you'll see if I hit F2, that will be the second camera, which was the front perspective. And then F3 will be the rear perspective. And that preview you can turn on and off with this cursor peak button up here. I leave it on just to see what I'm blending between. So you can see here this dark patch and some of this over here on the front are areas that I want to blend together. So what I'll do is make the brush a little bit bigger, and from this view I want to project from the side camera. So I'll just hit F1 and you can see it's showing me a preview of what that's going to look like. And then I just start brushing, and you can see it's replacing that little dark spot and some of these little inconsistencies on the model. And we can do that from multiple views. You can see here from this one it's actually adding a weird dip. I'm not sure I really like that from the side view. So I think I'll do is start blending from the rear view, which is mostly the rear projection here. And I'll just come over and paint here. And you can see it's adding that detail from the window there. As well as the roof, I'll start adding that. And we can come down here. And that looks pretty good. I think I'll keep that detail there. But you'll notice I kind of caught some of the wheel arch from the rear view. I think I want to keep that from the side view perspective, so I'll just click that and start painting that in there. Looks like there's a few little areas down here as well that I want to keep from the side view. And up through here, just start blending these together. So it's really up to you to decide what you want to keep from each view. One thing to note though, in kind of hard or low glancing angles, like if you've got a negative in the fender through here, you can see the projection kind of gets a little muddy and low pixel or low resolution. So those are things you want to keep an eye on. But for this first pass, I think this is going to be more than enough. We just want to kind of fill this with color, so that way we can keep working on it in the next round of Inpainting and refinement. So I think I've captured a lot of the details that I want to keep, so it wasn't that much work. Let's see what we keep here. I'll just add a little bit from the front projection back into the roof. And I think that did a pretty good job. So the next step we'll talk about is screen mask inpainting. So for the inpainting, the first thing we'll want to do is choose an area of the object we want to change. I think I'm going to work on the DLO or the cabin of this vehicle. So we'll kind of come to a tip-up view here, and we'll hit screen mask, and that will put it into masking mode. And you can still change the brush size. And what we're going to do is just paint over the area that we want to change. I think we'll work on, yeah, maybe we'll do the entire roof through here. Oops. You want to be careful you don't rotate the view, but that looks like a pretty good area. Maybe we'll change some of this through here. I think this is pretty interesting. I want to keep some of that, so I'm going to just paint that there. The next thing we'll do is come up to our prompt. The good thing about Stable Projectorz is it has multiple prompt boxes, so you can work with multiple prompts at the same time, depending on if you're inpainting maybe headlight or taillight. You can have separate prompts for that. So I think in the second box I have one already loaded that I just changed the first few words to a top view, which will indicate that it wants to do glass, or it's more from a top view of a vehicle. Then I'll come down to my settings here. We'll do 5 images for this. We'll leave the CFG at 7, and then the denoising strength. I kind of like this cant rail here, so I think I want it to, maybe it'll have a black A pillar or something. So I'm going to put the denoising down to 0.55. That won't change the image a lot. The higher this number, the more it will change the image. So we'll leave that there, and then I'll hit Gen Art. And from here, while it's doing that, you can still rotate the model around. So as these images start to generate, you'll be able to flip between them and see how the generation is going. So as you can see, they're starting to pop in here and start to generate. So I can just kind of click through them and see which ones are starting to work out. I think we've got a couple good ones. Probably this one here and this one here. They look pretty good. The A-pillar might be a little crooked, so we'll probably stick with this one, but we'll let these finish up. And the good thing is, while you're tumbling, you can always go back to the same camera view just by double clicking on the image. Same with the multi-view. As it's doing it, you can look at them from different views. It's pretty good. So I think we'll go with this one, and we'll just let this finish generating. Alright, so that looks like it's finished generating. That looks pretty good. I like that. Maybe a little wobble through here, but I think that's okay. Let's check out these other ones. Yeah, that one still a little wobble, but that's okay. These ones are probably no good. They're just a little weird. So this is where you will spend the time to kind of pick and choose. You'll be the curator of these outputs and decide which one you want. So I already know I don't want these, so I can just hit delete. We'll delete that one. This is the one we wanted to, actually these two we'll keep. That one I know I'm definitely going to use, so I'll just hit this last one and delete that as well. And that's that. So like we did with the multi-view projection, we can come and start blending this Inpainting with the rest of the model. You can see where there's a line here where you can see that's where the Inpainting masking was. Same with around the back here. There are some settings in the hue, saturation, value, and contrast here. If you change these settings and you want to get them back to their original, you just have to right click on them and they'll reset. We'll also change some of the blending here. I think the far, that's not going to do much, but we want a softer blend. But we're also going to use the painting or the brush here and just kind of blend this stuff together here. So I'm just going to click on this. As you can see, it starts to blend the colors together. You can see where maybe things don't line up and you've erased some areas to blend. You could just hit X and that will switch it to bring that stuff back in. So we'll just do that. I think that's pretty good there. There's a little line over the fender I might try and get rid of. And then through here, we'll blend this out. Through here. That all looks pretty good in the back. Yeah, we'll leave the back alone. That blended pretty well. So I think that's a pretty good job. Again, this is just the first go at kind of cleaning things up and getting some texture and colors in so we can start working with it. One thing you'll notice is that half of this model is not painted. I'm not too worried about the other side of the car because eventually what I'll do is just split this geometry in half and then just duplicate it over and the texture will show up on the other side. So I think for now we'll just leave it as is. So the next thing, you'll go around and paint what you want. I'll just time lapse this. I'm going to do the same process and in-paint the front here and maybe get some different front end variations and some rear variations going. So same thing, we'll change the field of view. I think I want a little flatter perspective for the front here. Zoom in. We'll leave it there. Screen mask, I'll come in and paint some of the front here. This way we'll do the entire front for this one. And then as you'll notice, I have this third box here. That was for the rear. I'm going to change this to front. And then we'll change this to headlight. And then we'll just hit generate art. We'll do a little more denoising on this one. This way we can have more variations. We'll probably do 0.65. Generate art. So you'll notice I did this one more time. I decided to use a lower perspective. I didn't quite like the results from the previous generation. So that's one thing you'll probably end up doing, is creating a few different camera angles, a few different in-painting scenarios so you can get the results you're after. So for this one, I'll just do this from lower perspective, and I'll change the denoising to 0.5, and then we'll generate some art. Again, it's up to you to curate what you want and decide what to keep and get rid of. I'm going to run this one more time at a higher denoise just to get some variation on the front as well. In order to do this, you'll hide all your previous generations. We'll come back up to the screen mask, and I'll just create a new one here. And for this, we'll do 0.65. As you can see, using the higher denoising changed the graphic elements and design quite a bit more than what was originally there. So it'll be up to you again to decide what you want. And so now I'll just go around to the rear and do the same process there. Again, play around with the denoising strength and your inpainting area and the camera angle to kind of pick and choose what you want to get. You'll be the designer here. So I hope this gave a good overview of how to use the inpainting tool to make variations and change the model. The more time you spend with it, the better the results will be. So once you've got your design where you want it with all the inpainting and graphic elements, you'll want to export a new texture map. So anything that's visible will be exported to the new map. So we'll come over here to export. No dilation because I don't need any of the texels merged between the UV spaces. So I'll click that. You go save it where you want. We'll just call that 1. And then you can go find the image, and this was what you'll see. So you can see here, this was the UV space from the Genie model, and you can see the new texture baked out to those coordinates. So in comparison, we've got the original on the right. So you can see the pixels that it overwrote and created this new texture here on the left. So we'll be using this in our 3D modeling application. It can be Blender, Maya, Modo, 3D Max, whatever you're used to. We'll just apply this as a new texture, and we can symmetry the model from there. So now I've just opened Modo, and I've imported the FBX file that we downloaded originally from Genie, as well as the same file that we used within Stable Projectorz. So you can see here I've got the mesh, I've got its texture here, and then you can see the UV layout that was generated during the retopology and export from Genie. So you can see the UV space coordinates and how the mesh overlays with them. So all we need to do is go find the texture we just exported. And for me, I'm just going to drag it in here and drop it right on top of this one here. So as you can see, it's not symmetrical, so it's exactly the way it was in Stable Projectorz. So what I like to do now is just duplicate this mesh here. And I'll just hide the original. You can rename them, do whatever you want. I do like to just bring this up so the wheels are sitting somewhere around the ground plane. And then what I'm going to do is turn on the wireframe, and we'll look at it from front view here. And you can see here that the edge loop doesn't quite run straight down the center of the vehicle. So all I'm going to do is scale it. I'll snap it to the center line and just scale it towards the middle there. And then I can just come pick that loop, delete it, and delete half of the model. And then I can just hit duplicate, mirror it over the Z, hit apply, and now we've got a symmetrical model here. You will have some sort of seam here. Obviously the color gradation going across the vehicle is showing a little bit of seam, but depending what your use case is for this might be good enough to bring this into a gravity sketch or even start building new topology based off of the graphics of this. It's really up to you and how you're going to use it. But the next thing I wanted to talk about was why I export a low setting with the retopology. It's mainly so I have this quad base mesh that I can subdivide pretty easily. So you can see here I'm just adding a smoothing to this mesh. I think it just helps give this a better look and feel. It gets rid of some of the faceting going on and some of the texturing here. It also allows me to come over to a side view and use some of the fall off tools to kind of reproportion this model. See, I can drag the front and rear, maybe use the radial fall off here to kind of play around with the cabin height and position, stuff like that. You know, it's a really good tool for proportional exploration, especially with the graphics applied to it. And that's one of the main benefits of being able to project these textures onto a 3D model. This way you can evaluate things and look at things from different angles and decide where line work might fall in a 3D space. Obviously, this is just the first draft, first round of it. You can also then export this again or use the image map that we created in Stable Projectorz and rerun the inpainting process for the entire model itself. So there's a lot of flexibility. It's still kind of a work in progress, the workflow. It can be very cyclical. Maybe you're going to come in here, make this symmetrical, clean up the UVs. Right now, the UV map for this is stacked on top of each other. It doesn't optimize the entire UV space, so you're kind of losing some of the texture quality and the texel density for this. But you can always just duplicate this, lay out a new UV map, bake this up to a better map and a newer texture, re-import it into Stable Projectorz, kind of do whatever you want. That's a whole nother topic for discussion and a little more involved for people who might understand how to do that. But again, this is good for an underlay, a 3D reference, or even just a quick design evaluation. In reality, without having to sit and explain this process should only take about 10 to 15 minutes. So you can see how beneficial that is to really just pump out a lot of different variations to inspire you and your design process. So if you continue watching, I'm going to show you how I use standalone versions of Stable Diffusion WebUI, more specifically Focus, as well as Vizcom, which is another standalone image generation software. So I'll show you various examples like this and how to achieve them. We'll still use Stable Projectorz as the blending tool, but I'll use the image output from there as image input, so image to image using these other AI softwares. So the setup process is almost exactly the same as I showed earlier in the video. We're still going to import the 3D model and add the custom artwork to texture it and set up our viewpoint. The only difference is we won't be using any of the prompting or internal settings within Stable Projectorz to generate the image. The only thing we'll do is actually generate essentially this viewpoint. This will essentially become a screenshot that we'll use as the image input for image to image. So we can just essentially leave the prompts blank and the model. It really doesn't matter. I'm just going to turn all the sampling steps down to low, maybe 2 or 3, doesn't really matter. You still want to have a high resolution, and the CFG scale can be extremely low as well, 1 to 2, and same with the denoising. We'll do 0.02. You can also check ignore depth and normals, so we'll essentially just recreate this image. What this does is set up all the camera projections and masking in the background so we can replace the image as we move forward. So I'll show you that in a second. So once this is there, I'll just hit Gen Art, and we can make 2 or 3, it doesn't really matter. So as you can see here, it essentially created these 2 new images with essentially the same texture as we were viewing. And then what we'll do here is just hit save, and it's going to export this image, and I will just call it AI input and save it kind of wherever you want. These are just examples of stuff I've made for this. Once we have that saved out, we'll go open up our Stable Diffusion WebUI. So now that we've got our image exported, I'm going to go ahead and open Focus. There are 2 versions of Focus. One is the main version 2.43. And then the other is a branch called the MRE Moonrider Edition. I'll leave links to both of these in the description. There's plenty of information online on how to utilize these. I'm just really going to show you how I use the image to image to create variations like we did in Stable Projectorz, but outside using various different tools. So the first thing we'll do is come over to our settings, and I like to just start with a couple different styles. We'll do hyper real, 3D model, and then for the prompt, it's very similar to I think what I had in Stable Projectorz, pristine bright silver, Honda, Audi, Volvo. I like to change the car brands in here just to try and mix and match different styles together, and then obviously the rest of the prompt there. Nothing in the negative prompt. You could put stuff there. I typically don't feel the need to, especially when using this web UI. Under image to image, I'll usually, it varies depending how much I want to vary the image input. Since the image we'll be using is kind of a low res, I'm going to put the start step all the way down and the denoise all the way up because I want to really change the image. I'll also do image upscale. Over here, this is why I use the MRE branches, mainly because it uses a canny control net. It's a little bit different than the one in the main branch that uses, you can use PyroCanny or CPDS. Those are two different ways that you do image to image, but in the MRE branch, this is what I do, and these are the settings. Models, it's the same model that I was using in Stable Projectorz, the ProtoVision, and then under sampling, anything really works. 7 to 8 is going to be really creative. We'll do like 7.8 for this one. I leave all this stuff the same. Miscellaneous, I'll just turn on metadata so the prompt and everything gets saved within the image, and then I'll just come over and load the image here, and then we'll just go find that image we just saved out from Stable Projectorz, which is AI input right here. That will load up, and then since we've got everything all set, I'll just generate maybe 4 or 5. It doesn't matter, however many images you want, and then I'll hit generate, and we'll let that do its thing. And there we go, we've got about 5 generations all using that prompt. This is where sometimes you'll get like glowing effects or inconsistent light. You might put that in the negative prompt. Again, just play around with it, have some fun, mix and match different things, and see what results you get. So from here, I've got those images done. So I'll jump back into Stable Projectorz here. And then from there, I'll just go and find one of those images we created. So I'll just click on one of these images and I'll hit load. So what it's going to do here is replace that image. So as you can see, I've got a few more generations. I did different prompts and played around with it. So I think I'll just choose one of these here. That one there. So as you can see, it just replaced the image and projected those onto the model. So then now we just have to repeat the process of blending here. So I'll just come over and do that. As you can see, depending on the lighting of the image, you'll have maybe a few inconsistent errors, but I think that's okay for now. This is again a good start, and I can I'll show you a way to clean that up using variations. So it should be pretty good from here. So once you get everything all painted the way you want it, we'll just come over to export, no dilation, and go save that in our project folder. As you can see, I've had some before. We'll just call this like 6, whatever you want. And that will save out the UV map that we can then apply in Modo or whatever 3D modeling software you're using as a texture. So I'll just come over and take 6 and drag it right there. Now we've got that on our 3D model that we've made symmetrical, and we're kind of ready to use this as a base or underlay for anything else. So the next tool you can use is a tool called Vizcom. It's a web-based application mainly tailored towards the design industry and concept design. Mainly you can sketch within the software, but you can also upload images that you may have created somewhere else. So what I've done is just imported that same image we created in Stable Projectorz, and it's essentially using it as image to image as well. I've got the same prompt over here on the right. I've got Vizcom General as the palette, and then I've also put in a reference image here. This was created with Midjourney, I believe, just to grab some of the colors and style from it. The drawing influence, you can play around with it. I'm going to leave it at 75 for now, and I'll do 4 generations. And you can see on the left I've created a few without the image influence. But again, I'm not going to dive too deep into this tool. There's many great videos out there explaining how to use this tool, and I'm still getting used to it myself, so maybe I'll do a more in-depth review and video on how I use the tool later on. So anyway, we'll hit generate and we'll let this cook away. So as you can see, they're starting to pop in there. We've got 4 generations on the bottom here, all fairly similar but pretty good. I think I'm going to choose this first one. I'll just hit add, and I'll just get rid of the rest for now. You can obviously add as many as you want, or you can just download them straight away. I think I'll actually just download this one here and save it so we can show it in Stable Projectorz. I'll just call it that. Then I'll just hit X, and that will get rid of them. But you can see here that one that I added is in the top of my layers. And just to show you, these are a few other ones I've created using the same method but different palettes and stuff like that. Again, this tool, spend some time with it, play around with it, get used to it. I think this is very beneficial as well because you can start sketching over it and inpainting certain areas, similar to how you do in Stable Projectorz, but you have a much more designer-friendly interface and tool palette that designers were more used to. So now we'll just jump back into Stable Projectorz, same process as before. We'll go here, load image, and I'll just go find that one. I think it was 17. So that one here, I'll load that, and there you go. That's it projected onto the 3D model that we had there. One thing to note that I don't think I mentioned before is these two images are generated at the same time. So any painting you do or blending you do on one image will carry over to the other one. So say I change the blending here, we'll do maybe the rear view there. I'll reuse this on this side here. When I switch over to this image, it will have the same blending or the same change on this first image as well. So just be careful of that. Maybe work on one image at a time, and when you get to a place you like, just export the UV map at that time. So I'm just going to go around here and blend a little bit more. So now that I've got this in a state that I like, I'm just going to hit export, and we'll save that as number 7. And I'll just find that UV texture and drag it over here, number 7. And now we've got it on the model, or our symmetried model here. So that's how you use external WebUI or other image-to-image AI tools to create variations. Use the tool that works best for you or something you're used to. So one thing I almost forgot to talk about were creating variations. It's a tool within Focus that is under the enhanced image over here. If you put an image in and hit vary and subtle, what it will do is create variations of the image. I'll go over that in a second here. So what I like to do is to replace the original texture map with one that we had generated. So we'll just go back to the original blue one that we had, and you'll see if once I delete these images, we'll just add the cameras back in there. You can see we have that texture map now applied with all the blending that we had already done. So what I'm going to do is bake this out again. Same thing we did with the low res. We're going to do with this high res, and so same settings, low and low, and we'll hit Gen Art. We'll let that do its thing. So now we've got these two image generations. I'm going to do the same thing and hit save, and we'll save that out and call it AI input 2. And then I'll come back over to our WebUI, and I'll come over here at enhance image. I think the base or the original branch also has that over here. Yeah, under upscale and variation. So this is pretty much the same tool. So we'll come over, just because I have this set, I'll hit very subtle, and I will go find that image we just exported, drag it there, and I can use the same prompt. I'm going to change that. I'm going to get rid of the silver because I don't want it to do anything. It shouldn't really use the prompt that much, but then we'll hit, I'll just do 5 variations. We'll just do 4 variations, making a even number, and we will hit generate. And I'll let that do its thing. It's going to disable the image to image and give you this warning, but it's going to utilize the image here for variations. So you can see here it's creating variations based off of that image input. This is a nice way to get some varied blending, but it's going to utilize a lot of the colors that were on the model originally and kind of keep them the same. And now we'll just jump back into Stable Projectorz one more time. It's a bit cyclical, going back and forth, but again, it's pretty straightforward, just replacing images and blending. So what I'll do now is just go and load these images. As you can see, we've got a few variations. I'm just going to flip through them for you real quick so you can see how similar they are as far as like the DLO. A lot of the graphic elements stay about the same, and things stay in about the same place. So when you start blending, you're more likely to have similar colors, maybe around the fenders and stuff like that. So I think it does a better job of kind of just fine-tuning the texture itself without having to inpaint a lot and stuff like that. So I think I'll do is choose this one here, and that will get applied there. And then we'll just do one more round of blending. But again, this one shouldn't be too bad considering it's using the base image as input. So you can see right now, even already, it's still pretty well blended. Let's see what this rear is doing. I think that's pretty good, actually. Yeah, I do like this little maybe it's a little inlet on the window here. So you'll just have to come around and do a little more fine-tuning, blending. It looks like that picked up some Honda. Cut lines are one thing I've noticed. It always tries to add them, but you can Photoshop over them, or, you know, depending if you're using this as just an underlay, you'll probably wouldn't even notice them. So that's how I use the variations to kind of upscale and help blend some more, and just try out different versions of designs. You can see the rear end there is similar, but it's a little bit blended. It's blended a little bit better down on the bottom and simplified the fender, and maybe there's some rocker detail here. Even the front, it gave a little bit of variation. So again, do what you like. I think this is a pretty good workflow. Once all these tools are consolidated together, this might be a pretty powerful use case or future tool set for designers moving forward. And then we can export this same as before as a UV map. Export it, save, open up Modo, drag and drop. And then we've got our texture applied here on a 3D model. And one last thing I should point out is that Vizcom also has a refine setting over on the right next to render. So once you generate your image here, like this one, I just hit refine, and you can see the difference there. Obviously there's some tuning you can do with the influence and inpainting and stuff, but again, you can use this image again in Stable Projectorz and kind of come up with your own workflow for that. So I showed these images in the beginning. These are some more examples of quality you can get after a few rounds of refinement and a little bit of cleanup. From here, the number of variations is endless, and you can be applied to anything from vehicles, characters, props, and any other 3D model you can think of. These won't be finalized 3D models. You won't be milling or 3D printing this data because of the lack of geometric detail, but the graphic elements and design intent is now visible from any view and can be used as underlays for new 3D creation or design evaluation. I think this will help speed up the translation of 2D to 3D and help guide and create a design much quicker. Don't be afraid to experiment and mix and match various software. I think that's the fun part, especially right now with all these new AI-driven tools and workflows. It's now up to you to come up with a process that best fits your work style and what you want to accomplish. You are the curator of these designs, so utilize these tools in a fun and creative way. I hope this gave some insight into this potential workflow and some of the new tools available, and I hope it was beneficial and may help your designs in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.